A billionaire CEO was about to lose everything his family built over 70 years, until a minimum wage waitress with a 4-year-old daughter looked at his engineering reports and said the 4 words that would change both their lives forever. "You're doing it wrong." Have you ever felt completely stuck on a problem that seemed impossible to solve? Where you've tried everything, consulted every expert, spent millions, and you're still failing? What if I told you the answer was sitting right in front of you the whole time? What if the person who could save your entire world was someone you'd never think to ask? But here's the question that'll keep you watching. Was this brilliant waitress about to save his $12 billion company, or was their growing obsession about to destroy everything they both held dear? If you've ever been underestimated because of where you come from, you need to hear this story. Hit that like button right now, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about genius, class, and where real solutions come from. Let me take you inside one of America's most powerful industrial dynasties and show you how it was collapsing from the inside. Pemberton Industrial Holdings, 70 years of American manufacturing excellence. $12 billion in annual revenue. A steel and heavy machinery empire that employed 85,000 workers across 43 facilities nationwide. Built from nothing by Garrett Pemberton Sr. back in 1952, starting with just a small fabrication shop in Pittsburgh. But by February 2024, everything was falling apart. At the heart of the crisis was their crown jewel, a $2 billion automated steel rolling mill that was supposed to cement their dominance in aerospace and defense manufacturing. Instead, it was producing a nightmare. 30% of everything coming off that line was defective. Microscopic stress fractures that only showed up after extensive testing, turning millions of dollars of premium steel into expensive scrap metal. Garrett Pemberton III, 34 years old, third generation to run the family business, was watching his inheritance crumble in real time. The man was running on 3 hours of sleep a night, 16-hour workdays, and pure desperation. He'd assembled the best minds money could buy. 52 engineers, graduates from MIT, Stanford, Carnegie Mellon, PhDs in metallurgy, mechanical engineering, industrial automation, some of the smartest people on the planet, all focused on one problem. 18 months, $45 million spent on consultants, new equipment, process modifications. Thousands of tests, hundreds of theories, 0 solutions. The stakes couldn't be higher. $800 million in government defense contracts hanging in the balance. If they couldn't fix this, those contracts would go to competitors. 85,000 jobs at risk. The Pemberton name, 70 years of industrial leadership, about to become a cautionary tale. Stock price down 28%. Board members whispering about management changes. Industry analysts questioning whether the company could survive. Have you ever had one of those problems that keeps you up at night, where you've tried everything, asked everyone, spent everything, and you're still stuck? Where the harder you try, the more impossible it seems. That was Garrett's reality. Every morning brought new failed tests. Every meeting ended with the same devastating conclusion. Nobody knew what was wrong. But here's what nobody knew. The solution was being served coffee and eggs just 2 blocks away. While Garrett was drowning in engineering reports, surrounded by charts and graphs that made no sense, Ruby Delacroix was finishing another night shift at Mickey's Diner. She had no idea that in less than 12 hours, she would look at those same impossible problems and see exactly what 52 brilliant engineers had missed. Because while Garrett was drowning in engineering reports, Ruby Delacroix was about to finish the night shift that would change everything. Now let me tell you about Ruby Delacroix, and why her story will break your heart before it inspires you. 23 years old. Single mother to 4-year-old Sophia, living in Pittsburgh's Lawrenceville neighborhood, where the American dream feels more like a distant memory than a real possibility. Ruby's father, Robert Delacroix, had worked 32 years as a machinist at a local steel plant. 32 years of getting up before dawn, coming home covered in metal dust, building America's industrial backbone with his bare hands. He taught Ruby everything: how machines work, why metal behaves the way it does, the secrets of steel that you only learn through decades of experience. Then came the early 2000s. The steel industry collapse that devastated communities like theirs. Robert lost everything. Not just his job, his identity, his purpose, his belief that hard work meant security. Ruby watched her father, this man who understood industrial processes better than most engineers, struggle to find work that valued his knowledge. Ruby had dreams back then. Big dreams. She wanted to be an engineer, to take everything her father had taught her and turn it into something official, something respected. She had the mind for it, could visualize complex mechanical systems, understand how forces worked together, see solutions that others missed. But at 19, life had other plans. She got pregnant with Sophia. Suddenly, engineering school became a luxury she couldn't afford. Dreams had to wait. Survival came first. So Ruby became a waitress at Mickey's Diner, just 2 blocks away from the Pemberton Industrial Holdings headquarters. For 4 years she'd been serving coffee and taking orders, watching her engineering dreams fade a little more each day. But Ruby wasn't just any waitress. See, Mickey's Diner was where the steel workers came. Shift changes, lunch breaks, after-work conversations. Ruby heard it all. Production problems, equipment failures, technical challenges that kept these guys up at night. While other servers focused on orders and tips, Ruby absorbed every word. Her photographic memory for customer orders, who wanted extra cream, who preferred their eggs over easy, who always asked for wheat toast. That same incredible memory captured every technical conversation she overheard. She'd file away discussions about heat treatments, pressure settings, timing sequences, metallurgy problems. At home, while Sophia slept, Ruby would connect the dots. Her father's knowledge combined with everything she'd learned from 4 years of listening to factory workers talk shop. She began to see patterns, understand relationships between different processes, develop theories about why certain problems kept happening. The brilliant mind that should have been in an engineering classroom was instead analyzing industrial challenges while wiping down tables and refilling coffee cups. If Ruby's story hits you in the heart, show some love with that like button. Trust me, you haven't seen anything yet. How many of you know someone brilliant who never got the chance to show it? Someone whose circumstances didn't match their potential. Someone who could have changed the world if they'd just gotten the right opportunity. Ruby was carrying around solutions to problems that were costing companies millions of dollars. She just needed someone to listen, someone to see past the uniform and recognize the genius underneath. Because on February 12th, 2024, fate was about to put Ruby and Garrett in the same room for the first time. And when a desperate billionaire CEO meets a waitress who's been quietly solving the world's problems in her head, everything changes. February 12th, 2024, 6 a.m., the kind of morning that breaks strong men. Garrett, Pemberton 3, hadn't slept in 36 hours. Another night spent staring at engineering reports, stress analysis charts, and metallurgy data that made no sense. His eyes burned. His hands shook from too much caffeine and too little rest. The weight of $800 million in failing contracts felt like it was crushing his chest. He needed air. He needed to walk. He needed to clear his head before facing another day of impossible problems and disappointed engineers. 20 degrees outside. Snow falling. The kind of Pittsburgh winter morning that drives you to seek shelter anywhere you can find it. Garrett found himself standing outside Mickey's Diner, a place he'd driven past thousands of times but never entered. Different world. Different people. But right now, he just needed coffee and 5 minutes where nobody was asking him for answers he didn't have. Ruby was covering an extra shift for a coworker who'd called in sick. She noticed him immediately, the expensive suit, the exhausted posture, the way he seemed completely out of place among the factory workers and truck drivers who made up her usual morning crowd. As she approached his table with coffee and a menu, Garrett's briefcase slipped from his lap. Papers scattered across the floor. Engineering diagrams, stress analysis reports, technical specifications from the rolling mill that was destroying his company. Ruby knelt to help gather the documents. And that's when she saw them. The stress fracture patterns, the temperature curves, the pressure readings. Her father's voice echoed in her memory, stories he'd told about similar problems at JLL Steel decades ago. Those stress patterns, Ruby said quietly, glancing around to make sure other customers couldn't overhear. They remind me of something my dad used to see at JLL Steel. He always said the issue wasn't the equipment itself. Garrett looked up, startled. This waitress was reading his engineering reports like she understood them. What did he say the issue was? Garrett asked, more curious than skeptical. Timing, Ruby replied, her confidence growing. He called it thermal shock memory. When metal gets heated and cooled too fast, or at the wrong intervals, it remembers that stress at the molecular level creates weak points that don't show up until later. Garrett stared at her. In 30 seconds, this young woman had described a concept that none of his 52 engineers had even considered. He used to say metal needs to breathe. Ruby continued. Like when you're baking bread. If you rush the rising process, the texture gets ruined. Steel is similar. It needs time between the heating and cooling phases to reach equilibrium. Now here's where this gets crazy. What should have been a 5-minute coffee stop turned into a 2-hour conversation that would change both their lives forever. Garrett forgot about his exhaustion, his meetings, his corporate responsibilities. He was completely absorbed by this woman who was explaining complex metallurgy using analogies about cooking and breathing. Ruby described something she called breathing intervals, brief pauses in the production process that would allow the steel to stabilize between major temperature changes. She talked about how shift patterns might affect consistency, how ambient conditions could influence cooling rates, how operator fatigue during certain hours might create timing variations. Her insights weren't based on textbooks or computer models. They came from 4 years of listening to workers discuss their problems, combined with her father's 3 decades of hands-on experience and her own natural ability to see patterns others missed. Garrett's worldview was shattering in real time. Here was a minimum wage waitress solving problems that had stumped some of the most brilliant engineering minds in America, not through advanced mathematics or theoretical physics, but through practical understanding and intuitive analysis. Have you ever met someone who just got it in a way nobody else did? Someone who could see what you couldn't see. Someone whose mind worked so differently from yours that their perspective revealed blind spots you never knew existed. That was happening to Garrett right now. This wasn't just intellectual fascination. This was recognition of genius in its purest form. Raw, unpolished, but absolutely real. But Garrett was about to make a decision that would either save his company or destroy his reputation forever. Garrett left Mickey's Diner that morning with his mind racing and his world turned upside down. For 18 months, 52 brilliant engineers had failed to solve his company's crisis. Now a 23-year-old waitress had offered a solution that made more sense than anything he'd heard from MIT graduates and Stanford PhDs. But here's the impossible position he found himself in. How do you bet your family's 70-year legacy on the theories of someone with no formal training, no credentials, no industry experience? The logical choice was obvious. Trust the experts. Trust the process. Trust the system that had built Pemberton Industrial Holdings into a $12 billion empire. But logic wasn't working. The system was failing. The experts were stumped. Garrett made a decision that would have terrified his board of directors and shocked his engineering team. He was going to secretly test Ruby's theories on the company's smallest rolling mill. Working with just 3 trusted production supervisors, Garrett quietly modified the operating procedures for Mill 7, their least critical facility, where a failure wouldn't trigger company-wide panic. The modifications were subtle. Ruby's breathing intervals were introduced as routine maintenance protocols. The timing adjustments between heating and cooling phases were presented as standard calibration updates. The engineering team had no idea they were testing theories developed by a diner waitress. Dr. Patricia Hawthorne, the company's lead metallurgist, questioned some of the new procedures. These timing changes don't align with industry best practices, she warned. William Cartwright, the production manager, expressed concerns about reducing efficiency for unproven modifications. Garrett deflected their questions, claiming the changes were based on proprietary research he was conducting personally. His evasiveness created tension with his technical staff, but he couldn't risk revealing the true source of his new approach. The results were nothing short of miraculous. Within 2 weeks, Mill 7's defect rate plummeted from 31% to 4%. The steel produced during Ruby's modified process didn't just meet aerospace standards, it exceeded them. Quality control tests showed molecular structures more consistent than anything the company had achieved in 5 years. The math was staggering. If these results could be replicated across all facilities, Pemberton Industrial Holdings would save $150 million annually in material costs alone. The $800 million in government contracts that had been in jeopardy were now secure. Ruby Delacroix had solved in 2 weeks what 52 engineers couldn't solve in 18 months. But success created an even more complex problem than failure ever had. How do you credit a minimum wage waitress with saving your billion-dollar company? How do you explain to shareholders, customers, and competitors that your breakthrough innovation came from someone working night shifts at a diner? The moral weight of the situation was crushing Garrett. While industry publications praised his innovative leadership and his stock price soared, Ruby was still serving coffee and struggling to pay rent. She had no idea that her insights had just saved thousands of jobs and hundreds of millions of dollars. Garrett began visiting Mickey's diner regularly, ostensibly to discuss technical details, but increasingly drawn by his fascination with Ruby's unconventional brilliance. Their conversations ranged far beyond metallurgy to encompass philosophy, problem-solving methodologies, and the nature of intelligence itself. His growing personal interest in Ruby complicated an already ethically complex situation. Was his attraction genuine, or was he simply mesmerized by her unique perspective? The power imbalance between them, billionaire CEO and struggling single mother, made any romantic feelings potentially exploitative. Meanwhile, his engineering team grew increasingly suspicious of his secretive behavior and unexplained process modifications. Board members questioned his leadership style. His wife noticed his frequent absences and distracted demeanor. The woman who had saved his company was becoming an obsession that threatened to destroy everything else in his life. I know some of you are thinking this can't be real, but wait until you hear what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed because this story takes a turn nobody saw coming. But success was about to create an even bigger problem than Garrett ever imagined possible. The success of Mill 7 was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Garrett quietly implemented Ruby's timing protocols across all 43 Pemberton Industrial Holdings facilities. Every rolling mill, every production line, every automated system received the same modifications: the breathing intervals, the adjusted cooling sequences, the precise timing calibrations that Ruby had developed. The transformation was extraordinary. Company-wide defect rates dropped to less than 2%, the lowest in industry history. Production efficiency increased by 12%. Equipment maintenance costs fell by 30%. Worker safety improved dramatically as operators no longer struggled with unpredictable equipment failures. Pemberton Industrial Holdings became the undisputed leader in aerospace-grade steel production. The $800 million in government contracts were not only secured but expanded. New customers lined up, attracted by quality standards that competitors couldn't match. The company's stock price soared 45% in 8 months. Industry analysts called it one of the most remarkable corporate turnarounds in modern manufacturing history. Business journals featured Garrett on their covers, praising his innovative leadership and breakthrough problem-solving abilities. CEO of the Year awards followed, speaking engagements at prestigious conferences, invitations to join corporate boards and government advisory panels. Garrett Pemberton III was hailed as a visionary leader who had revolutionized American manufacturing through his technical brilliance and innovative thinking. Meanwhile, Ruby Delacroix continued working night shifts at Mickey's Diner for $12 an hour. She still lived paycheck to paycheck, still struggled to afford daycare for Sophia, still worried about making rent each month. While her breakthrough insights had generated hundreds of millions in value, she remained invisible to the corporate world that was celebrating her innovations. The injustice was eating Garrett alive. Every award ceremony felt like theft. Every article praising his genius felt like a betrayal. Every speech he gave about innovation and leadership reminded him that he was accepting credit for someone else's brilliance. Ruby had saved his company, secured his family's legacy, and transformed an entire industry. Her reward was continued anonymity and financial struggle. The moral weight became unbearable. Garrett found himself lying awake at night, not from business stress but from ethical agony. He'd built his reputation on Ruby's ideas while she remained trapped in circumstances that prevented her from pursuing her own engineering dreams. His frequent visits to Mickey's Diner had become the highlight of his week. Their conversations had evolved beyond technical discussions to encompass everything from philosophy to parenting. Ruby's insights on business problems, human nature, and strategic thinking consistently amazed him. But these visits were creating problems at home. His wife questioned his absences and distracted behavior. Board members noticed his unusual interest in production facilities and operations details. The press began speculating about his hands-on management style and mysterious research projects. The annual shareholders' meeting was approaching, the biggest event on Pemberton Industrial Holdings' corporate calendar. 500 investors, industry analysts, media representatives, and corporate leaders would gather to hear Garrett present the company's remarkable transformation. He was expected to detail the innovations that had saved the company, the technical breakthroughs, the strategic decisions, the leadership vision that had turned crisis into triumph. Garrett faced an impossible choice. He could continue the fiction that had made him famous, present himself as the innovative genius who had single-handedly solved problems that stumped dozens of experts, accept the praise, maintain the company's credibility, protect his reputation and his family's industrial legacy. Or he could tell the truth. Acknowledge that a 23-year-old waitress with no formal education had provided all the critical insights. Admit that his celebrated leadership was built on someone else's unrecognized genius. Risk his reputation, his company's credibility, and his position as CEO. The stakes couldn't be higher. Revealing Ruby's role would raise uncomfortable questions about his competence, his honesty, and his company's research capabilities. It could damage relationships with customers who expected innovations to come from formal engineering teams. It might even trigger shareholder lawsuits about misrepresentation. But continuing the lie felt increasingly impossible. How long could he accept credit for work that wasn't his? How could he look at Ruby's struggling circumstances and remain silent about her contributions? Have you ever had to choose between what's easy and what's right? Between protecting yourself and protecting someone else? Between maintaining comfortable lies and acknowledging uncomfortable truths? That was Garrett's reality as the shareholders' meeting approached. The most important presentation of his career would either cement his reputation as an innovative leader or destroy everything he'd built through decades of hard work. Because at that shareholders' meeting, Garrett was about to make a choice that would shock everyone in attendance. May 15, 2024. The Grand Ballroom of the Pittsburgh Convention Center. 500 of the most powerful people in American industry gathered for Pemberton Industrial Holdings' annual shareholders meeting. Garrett stood at the podium, looking out at faces that represented billions of dollars in investment capital. Board members, institutional investors, industry analysts, financial journalists, all waiting to hear how he had engineered one of the most remarkable corporate turnarounds in manufacturing history. His prepared speech was loaded into the teleprompter. 23 pages praising his engineering team's innovative thinking, his company's research capabilities, his own strategic leadership. The speech that would cement his reputation as a visionary CEO. But as Garrett began to speak, he found himself departing from his prepared remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you today to discuss the innovations that saved our company. But I cannot, in good conscience, accept credit for work that was not mine. A murmur rippled through the audience. This wasn't what anyone expected. 18 months ago, when our best engineers couldn't solve our production crisis, the answer came from someone none of you would ever think to consult. A 23-year-old single mother working night shifts at Mickey's Diner, 2 blocks from our headquarters. The room fell silent. Cameras stopped moving. Analysts stopped typing. Garrett told Ruby's complete story, her father's industrial background, her deferred dreams of engineering school, her years listening to workers discuss technical problems. The February morning when she looked at his engineering reports and saw what 52 experts had missed. He explained thermal shock memory, breathing intervals, the timing modifications that transformed their entire production process. He detailed how Ruby's insights had saved $150 million annually and secured $800 million in government contracts. Ruby Delacroix solved our crisis not through advanced degrees or computer models, but through practical wisdom, analytical brilliance, and the kind of innovative thinking that emerges from necessity rather than privilege. The audience was stunned. This wasn't just a business presentation. It was a confession that challenged everything they believed about expertise, innovation, and where breakthrough solutions originate. The media explosion was immediate and massive. Within hours, news organizations across the country were running headlines: Waitress saves billion-dollar company, the genius hidden in plain sight, when a diner booth becomes a think tank. Ruby's phone started ringing before she even knew what had happened. Interview requests from CNN, NBC, The Wall Street Journal. Speaking invitations from Harvard Business School, MIT, Stanford. Scholarship offers from engineering programs across the country. The woman who had been invisible to the corporate world suddenly found herself at the center of a national conversation about talent recognition, economic opportunity, and the sources of innovation. The transformation extended far beyond Ruby's personal circumstances. Major corporations announced new programs designed to identify unconventional talent. General Electric launched an initiative to recruit problem solvers from non-traditional backgrounds. Boeing created partnerships with community colleges to find practical innovators. Ford established mentorship programs connecting factory workers with engineering teams. Business schools began incorporating Ruby's story into case studies about diverse thinking and innovation management. The Harvard Business Review published a special issue on hidden genius in the American workforce. Ruby herself was overwhelmed by the sudden attention but determined to use the opportunity wisely. She accepted a full scholarship to Carnegie Mellon's engineering program while working as a special consultant to Pemberton Industrial Holdings' innovation team. For Garrett, the decision to tell the truth had been professionally risky but personally liberating. His relationship with Ruby evolved from guilty fascination to genuine mentorship and friendship. His marriage strengthened as the secrecy and ethical burden lifted from his shoulders. The corporate world had been forced to confront uncomfortable truths about expertise and intelligence. Innovation didn't require expensive degrees or prestigious credentials. Breakthrough solutions could come from anyone, anywhere if organizations were willing to listen. If this story proves that brilliance can come from anywhere, give it a like and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Ruby Delacroix had gone from serving coffee to transforming an industry, proving that American dreams are still possible when courage meets opportunity. So what can we learn from this extraordinary story? What does Ruby and Garrett's journey teach us about life, success, and human potential? First lesson: intelligence has no dress code. Genius doesn't announce itself with diplomas, designer suits, or corner offices. It shows up in work uniforms, behind service counters, on factory floors. Ruby's brilliance was hidden behind a waitress apron, but her mind was solving problems that stumped Harvard graduates. The next breakthrough in your industry might come from someone you'd never think to ask. Second lesson: listen to different voices. Garrett's 52 engineers all had similar backgrounds, similar training, similar ways of thinking. They were trapped in the same mental frameworks that created the problem in the first place. Ruby's perspective was different because her experience was different. Breakthrough solutions often come from people who see your challenges through completely different lenses. Third lesson: moral courage pays off. Garrett could have stayed silent, kept collecting awards, and maintained his reputation as an innovative leader. Instead, he chose truth over comfort, justice over convenience. That decision didn't just free Ruby from anonymity, it freed him from the weight of living a lie. Doing the right thing is rarely the easy thing, but it's always the thing you can live with. Fourth lesson: question your assumptions about expertise. We're conditioned to believe that the most credentialed person in the room has the best answers. Ruby's story proves that expertise comes from understanding, not just education. Someone who truly grasps how systems work can often see solutions that formal training misses. Knowledge isn't just academic, it's practical, intuitive, and experiential. Fifth lesson: value people, not pedigrees. Ruby's background didn't determine her capabilities. Her circumstances didn't define her potential. She was brilliant long before anyone recognized it, solving problems long before anyone paid attention. We miss incredible talent every day because we judge people by their current situation instead of their actual abilities. Here's the question that should keep you thinking: how many Ruby Delacroix are working in restaurants, retail stores, or factories right now? How many solutions are we missing because we only listen to certain voices? How much human potential goes unrecognized because it doesn't fit our expectations? Your call to action starts today. Look for wisdom in unexpected places. Give credit where it's actually due. Never underestimate someone based on their circumstances. Be willing to admit when someone else has the answer you've been searching for. Most importantly, have the courage to act on what's right, even when it's difficult. Ruby and Garrett's story isn't just about steel and engineering. It's about recognizing human potential wherever it exists and having the courage to act on what's right. It's about understanding that extraordinary solutions can come from ordinary people, and that true leadership means lifting others up instead of taking all the credit. Ruby Delacroix went from serving coffee at midnight to transforming a $12 billion industry. Her story proves that extraordinary potential exists in the most ordinary places, waiting for someone brave enough to recognize it and act on it. If this story changed how you think about intelligence and opportunity, hit that like button right now. Let's show the algorithm that stories about recognizing hidden talent matter. Share this with someone who's ever been underestimated, someone whose potential doesn't match their current circumstances. They need to know that their time is coming. Subscribe for more extraordinary stories that prove anything is possible when courage meets opportunity. We're building a community that celebrates overlooked genius and unexpected heroes. Here's my question for you. Have you ever met someone whose potential was hidden by their circumstances? Someone whose brilliance was disguised by their background? Drop your story in the comments below, because those encounters change how we see the world. Ruby's journey from waitress to engineering consultant reminds us that innovation has no address, genius has no uniform, and breakthrough solutions often come from the people we least expect. Your next great idea might come from the person standing behind you in line, sitting across from you at lunch, or working the night shift while you sleep. And if you think Ruby's story is incredible, wait until you hear about the janitor who discovered a mathematical breakthrough that stumped MIT professors for decades.